The sky was gray that morning, as if it carried the same grief that weighed on my chest. My husband's casket was lowered into the ground, draped with flowers already wilting in the cold November air. The sound of the bugle cut through the silence, its lonely notes piercing deeper than any knife. People around me whispered prayers, but their voices blurred into a single cruel reminder: I was now alone. I clutched the folded program in my hands so tightly it tore at the corners. Every detail of that day was etched into my bones: the scent of lilies, the damp earth, the polished wood of the coffin reflecting the tears I refused to shed in front of them. My body shook, not just from sorrow but from the haunting thought that I no longer belonged anywhere. My husband was gone. My protector, my anchor, gone forever. And then came the voice I hated most in that moment, my sister's. While others offered hollow condolences, she leaned close to one of my cousins and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "At least now the house will finally be mine." Her words sliced through the air sharper than the chill. I turned my head, half expecting to see guilt on her face. But no, she smiled, a smug curl of her lips, as though death itself had given her a gift. The blood drained from my body. In that moment, my grief transformed into something darker: betrayal. I tried to steady myself, but the betrayal pressed heavier than the casket in front of me. Every Sunday dinner, every Christmas morning we shared as children, all of it crumbled in a single sentence. She wasn't mourning my loss. She was celebrating her gain. When the service ended, relatives came up to hug me, their hands cold, their words meaningless. My sister stood beside me, stiff and composed, her designer coat wrapped tight around her as though she were guarding treasure. She did not shed a tear. Instead, she placed her manicured hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything now." But her tone wasn't one of comfort. It was possession. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the living room. The house was painfully silent. His chair by the fireplace sat empty, and I could still smell his aftershave clinging faintly to the cushion. My sister's words echoed in my mind, louder than the tick of the clock. "At least now the house will finally be mine." I broke. My body collapsed onto the rug, and I cried with a ferocity I didn't know I had left. My sobs echoed against the walls, a desperate howl into a universe that had stolen everything from me. I wasn't just grieving my husband. I was grieving the betrayal of blood. The following morning, as if fate were determined to salt my wounds, my sister arrived unannounced. She strolled into the kitchen as though she owned it, heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She poured herself coffee from my husband's favorite mug, the one I hadn't yet touched since his death, and said casually, "I already spoke with Dad's lawyer. He agrees the estate will be easier to manage in my name." I froze. My hands shook so violently the glass I held slipped and shattered across the tile. She didn't flinch. She didn't care. She just sipped the coffee, watching me with eyes full of satisfaction. "Don't fight me on this," she continued. "You've never been good with responsibility. Let me handle the inheritance. It's for your own good." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip that mug from her hands and throw it against the wall, but the weight of grief chained me to silence. My throat burned with words I couldn't release. All I could do was stand there, trembling, as she dismantled what was left of my world. That night, I sat in the dark, surrounded by unpaid bills, sympathy cards scattered across the table, and silence that felt like suffocation. My husband's absence was unbearable, but my sister's betrayal was a living ghost, haunting every corner of this house. I thought funerals were about loss. I never realized they could also be about theft. And in that moment, one truth burned hotter than all the pain. This was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The days after the funeral felt like walking barefoot across shattered glass, every step cut deeper. I expected comfort from my family warmth, a hand to hold, maybe a meal left on my doorstep. Instead, I was met with silence. My phone buzzed once, twice, and then not at all. At first, I thought everyone was just giving me space. Grief is uncomfortable, and maybe they didn't know what to say. But then I opened our family group chat. The last message I saw wasn't a condolence. It was a photo my sister smiling at brunch, champagne glass raised, captioned, "Finally free. Cheers to new beginnings." The comments underneath? Hearts, clapping emojis, congratulations from cousins, and even an uncle. No one mentioned me. No one asked how I was holding up. It was as if my pain had been erased, replaced by her performance of happiness. I typed a reply, deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. What could I possibly say? That their cheers were daggers? That every laugh in that photo pressed harder on the bruise already swelling inside me? I threw the phone onto the couch, but the silence was worse than the noise. Then Thanksgiving came. In America, it's supposed to be the day families gather, roast turkey filling the house with warmth, children running around with pumpkin pie on their faces, football on television. A day when no one eats alone. But my invitation never arrived. I checked the mailbox 3 times. Nothing. I checked the group chat, no mention of me. Just photos of my sister setting the table. A golden turkey glistening in the center. Wine glasses lined like trophies. My mother's voice floated through a short video. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You did everything perfectly." I dropped my phone onto the counter and felt my knees buckle. I had been replaced. Not just ignored, replaced. My mother praising her as though she were the only daughter she ever had. That night, I microwaved leftover soup in a chipped bowl, the hum of the appliance the only sound in the house. I sat at the table staring at the empty chair across from me, the one my husband once filled, and I thought about the laughter happening just a few miles away. My own blood feasting together, pretending I didn't exist. Tears blurred my vision, and anger rose like wildfire. I slammed my spoon onto the table, the soup sloshing over the edge. "How dare they?" I whispered into the dark. "How dare they treat me like a ghost?" The days turned into weeks. Christmas lights went up around the neighborhood. Houses glowed red and green. Children pressed their faces to frosted windows, waiting for Santa. I sat in mine, lights unplugged, blinds drawn. Then a card arrived in the mail. My heart fluttered for a second. Maybe it was from them. Maybe they remembered me. I tore it open. It was a glossy family photo. My parents, my sister, cousins, all dressed in matching red sweaters in front of the Christmas tree. The words in silver cursive read, "From our family to yours, Merry Christmas." But there was no yours. There was no me. They had taken the picture in my parents' living room. The same one where I grew up opening gifts at dawn. I searched for my face, out of habit, then realized I was never meant to be there. My chest heaved, breath shallow, as rage and sorrow collided inside me. The photo slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor like ash. That night, I made a decision. If they could erase me so easily, then I would stop begging for their recognition. I would stop looking at the empty chair and waiting for an invitation that would never come. But make no mistake, this was not surrender. It was the birth of something else. The pain, the loneliness, the betrayal, they weren't going to bury me. They were sharpening me. And the day would come when my family, my sister especially, would regret turning me into their shadow. Because even shadows have a way of returning in the dark. Bills. That was all my life seemed to be now. Electric bills, water bills, mortgage notices stamped in red with the words "past due" screaming at me from the kitchen table. I used to open the mailbox and expect letters from friends, magazines, birthday cards. Now, every envelope felt like a loaded gun aimed at my chest. The life I once knew, quiet dinners with my husband, Sunday morning pancakes, movies on the couch, had evaporated. What was left was a grind so cruel. It stole even the air from my lungs. I picked up extra shifts at the diner downtown, pouring coffee for truckers at 5 a.m., forcing a smile while my body ached from standing 12 hours straight. My hands smelled of grease and burnt bacon, and my feet throbbed inside cheap sneakers I couldn't afford to replace. The tips were small quarters, crumpled dollar bills, and yet I clutched them as if they were gold, because without them I couldn't keep the lights on. When I wasn't at the diner, I worked nights at Walmart, scanning groceries under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights. Every beep of the register reminded me of what I had lost. Families walked through the aisles, kids tugging at carts, couples laughing over snack choices. And there I was, hollow, invisible, wearing a name tag that felt more like a brand burned into my skin. Nobody. Meanwhile, my sister's life played out like a cruel movie trailer on social media. a new handbag, a weekend spa retreat. A photo of her holding a mimosa by the pool captioned, "Self-care is everything." Each post stabbed deeper, a reminder that she was bathing in luxury built from the inheritance she had stolen from me. Sometimes, after long shifts, I'd sit in my car in the Walmart parking lot and scroll through her feed, tears dripping onto the screen. My chest would tighten until I could barely breathe. The woman who should have stood beside me in grief had turned my pain into her stepping stone. But the world didn't stop for my sorrow. Rent was due. Gas prices climbed. Groceries cost more every week. I learned to live on instant noodles and day-old bread from the clearance rack. I patched my clothes instead of buying new ones. I pawned my wedding ring one desperate afternoon, handing it to a stranger behind glass while my heart shattered a second time. The loneliness was unbearable. Nights stretched long and merciless. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling. The hum of the refrigerator the only companion in the house. Sometimes I'd hear laughter drifting from the neighbors' backyard barbecues, the smell of grilled burgers sneaking through my window, and it would hit me like a cruel reminder. Life went on without me. I tried to reach out once. I called my mother. When she answered, her tone was clipped. Impatient. "I'm busy, honey. Your sister's helping me plan a little trip. Call later. Okay?" Then the line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, shaking. My mother, the woman who once braided my hair for school, who kissed my forehead when I had fevers, had chosen her. Not me. The anger burned hotter than hunger. I wanted to scream. To march into my sister's new luxury apartment and demand every dollar back. But instead, I put on my Walmart vest and clocked in for another night. Because rage doesn't pay the bills. One evening, as I dragged my exhausted body home, I found an envelope taped to my door. My heart sank, already knowing what it was. I tore it open. Final notice. Eviction proceedings will begin in 14 days unless payment is received. The paper slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the ground like the last leaf of autumn. I sank to my knees on the porch, the cold biting into my skin, and sobbed until my throat was raw. It wasn't just about losing a roof over my head, it was about losing the last piece of dignity I had left. But somewhere in that ocean of despair, a spark ignited. A whisper inside me, fragile but fierce. "They think you're weak. They think you're beaten. Prove them wrong." I pressed the eviction notice to my chest, tears still streaking my face, and swore to myself that this suffering would not be the end of me. Every insult, every betrayal, every cold shoulder from my own blood, it was fuel. And though my body was weary, my soul was sharpening. Because survival was no longer just about paying bills. It was about revenge. It was a Saturday morning when the knock came. Sharp, impatient, like someone who believed they already owned the house behind the door. I wiped my hands on a towel, heart pounding. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there she was, my sister. My blood boiled instantly. She stood on the porch like a queen surveying her kingdom, a leather handbag swinging from her wrist, sunglasses perched high on her nose. She didn't look like someone visiting a grieving widow. She looked like someone coming to collect. "Move," she said flatly, brushing past me without so much as a hello. Her heels clicked across the hardwood as she walked straight into the garage. I followed, confusion tangled with rage. "What are you doing here?" My voice cracked, half from exhaustion, half from fury. She pointed to a stack of boxes labeled Dad's belongings. "These are mine now, sentimental value." I froze. Those boxes held my father's old photo albums, his veteran medals, even the wooden toy train he carved for us when we were kids. Artifacts of a life we both shared. Artifacts I had clung to when the nights felt unbearable. "You can't just take those," I snapped, stepping between her and the boxes. My body shook, but this time not from grief. This time it was anger, raw and unfiltered. She smirked, tilting her head. "Why not? You can barely afford the roof over your head. You'll probably sell them anyway. At least I'll take care of them." That was the breaking point. Something inside me, something beaten down, silenced, humiliated, finally clawed its way out. I grabbed the box closest to me and hugged it to my chest. "You're not taking a damn thing from this house," I shouted, voice echoing through the garage. Not one medal, not one photograph, not even a scrap of paper. Her face twisted, caught between shock and amusement. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You think screaming makes you strong? You're pathetic. You've always been pathetic. That's why everyone sides with me." Her words hit like bullets, but instead of bleeding, I burned. Years of rivalry, years of being compared, years of being dismissed, all of it erupted at once. I slammed the box onto the workbench, dust flying. "You walk into this house like it's yours. Like I don't exist. Like my pain is just background noise to your parade. But listen to me carefully, this house is still mine, and I will not let you erase me." She laughed, the sound hollow, sharp as broken glass. "Erase you? Sweetheart, you erased yourself the moment you married him and distanced from us. Don't blame me for the consequences of your choices." My hands trembled so violently I thought they'd shatter, but instead of collapsing, I picked up one of Dad's medals and held it between us. "Do you see this? He earned this fighting for a country where justice matters, and if you think I'm going to let you waltz in here and steal what's left of him from me, you're wrong. Dead wrong." Her smile faltered. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. I stepped closer, my voice dropping into a growl. "Take one more step toward these boxes, and I swear, I'll drag you out of here myself." Silence. The air between us thickened, heavy with the years of resentment boiling over. My chest heaved, tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Finally, she huffed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "Fine, keep your junk, but don't think this is over. The lawyer's on my side. You'll see." She stomped back through the house, heels striking like gunshots, and slammed the door behind her. The walls rattled, but I stood frozen in the garage, clutching my father's medal in my fist so tightly the edges cut into my palm. And for the first time since my husband's death, I didn't feel weak. My body trembled, but it wasn't collapse, it was adrenaline. It was the awakening of something fierce inside me. I sank to my knees, metal pressed against my forehead, and whispered through clenched teeth, "No more. No more letting her take. No more letting her win." The garage smelled of dust and gasoline, but to me it smelled like war. That day, I realized grief had kept me quiet, but betrayal had given me a weapon. And I swore as the sun set and shadows stretched across the driveway that the next time my sister tried to strip me of what was mine, she wouldn't just face a widow. She'd face a woman ready to fight. Winter pressed hard against the windows, wind howling through the cracks like ghosts that refused to leave. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at another stack of bills, when I heard the mailbox slam shut outside. I almost didn't get up. Mail had become a daily punishment, past due notices, final warnings, credit card threats, but something pushed me to check. Inside was a single white envelope, thicker than usual, stamped with the name of my family's law firm in bold black ink. My heart dropped. My hands shook as I carried it inside. For a moment, I just stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what fresh wound waited inside. Finally, I tore it open. The words blurred at first through my tears, but as I blinked them into focus, the message cut like fire. "You are hereby invited to the official reading of your parents' will. Attendance is mandatory." I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. I read it again and again. For months, my sister had strutted around, certain everything was already hers. She bragged about having spoken to Dad's lawyer, about how things were already decided. But this letter told a different story. Nothing had been finalized. Nothing had been handed over. I clutched the paper so tightly it crumpled. My breath came ragged, half hope, half terror. Because this could be salvation, or it could be the final nail in my coffin. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house like a caged animal, the letter clenched in my hand. Every shadow felt like my sister's laughter, every creak of the floorboards her footsteps, every whisper of the wind her voice mocking me. I tried to imagine what the will might say. Would it confirm everything she had claimed, that I was worthless, that I deserved nothing? Or could there be something left for me? Something my parents had hidden, waiting to be revealed when it mattered most? The possibilities churned in my mind like a storm. The next day, I walked into the diner half distracted, my apron strings tangled, hands trembling as I poured coffee. A regular named Frank noticed. "You all right, sweetheart? You look like you've seen a ghost." "No." I forced a smile, but it cracked. "Maybe I have." Later that evening, I sat in my car in the Walmart parking lot, the letter spread across the steering wheel. My reflection in the glass looked haunted dark circles under my eyes, lips pale, shoulders slumped. But behind that reflection, I saw something else, the faintest flicker of fire. Because for the first time in months, I had something my sister didn't know I had. A chance. Still, fear gnawed at me. What if the will really did favor her? What if my parents, in their final act, erased me just like the rest of the family had? The thought clawed at my chest until I gasped for air. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and whispered, "Please, please, God, don't let her win again." The day of the reading approached like a drumbeat, each sunrise louder, faster, more unbearable. I barely ate. I barely slept. Every night, I replayed the scene in my head, my sister smirking across the table, the lawyer's voice delivering my fate. And yet, underneath the dread, a strange calm began to grow. Because no matter what the will said, this was my chance to face her, to stop being the ghost she wanted me to be, to stand in that room, look her in the eye, and show her I was not broken. On the morning of the reading, I dressed in the only decent outfit I had left: black slacks, a blouse I ironed 3 times to hide the frayed seams. I pulled my hair back, dabbed powder over the lines under my eyes, and stared at myself in the mirror. "You will not cry today," I whispered. "You will not shake, you will not beg." I tucked the letter into my purse like a weapon, and as I locked the door behind me, a strange thought flickered in my chest, a thought I hadn't dared feel in months. Hope. Not the fragile kind that breaks under the weight of betrayal, but the sharp kind. The kind that slices through fear and whispers, "This fight isn't over." The law office smelled of leather and polished wood, the kind of place where secrets were unwrapped slowly, deliberately. I walked in with my head held high, though inside my chest a war raged between fear and fire. My sister was already there, lounging in a chair like it was a throne, legs crossed, a smug smile painted on her face. She glanced up, her eyes dripping with disdain. "Oh, you made it. Brave of you to show, considering you'll be walking out with nothing." I didn't answer. Not because I agreed, but because I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. The lawyer entered, a gray-haired man in a crisp suit, carrying a thick folder that looked heavier than stone. He greeted us politely, but his eyes lingered on me just a second longer, almost as if he knew the storm I'd weathered. "Let's begin," he said, taking his seat at the mahogany desk. The room fell into a suffocating silence. The only sound was the shuffling of papers as he opened the will. My sister leaned forward, practically vibrating with greed. "As per your parents' final wishes," the lawyer began, his voice deep and steady, "their assets are to be divided as follows." I braced myself, my nails digging into my palms. "Certain personal effects, jewelry, artwork, and vehicles will go to the elder daughter." "Thou." My sister let out a triumphant laugh, tossing her hair back. "See? Told you." She shot me a look of victory, as if the war were already over. But the lawyer raised his hand, silencing her. "However," he continued, voice deliberate, "the primary residence, including all property and land, as well as the bulk of financial holdings, are to be left to the younger daughter." Time stopped. The words hung in the air like thunder, and for a moment I thought I had misheard. My breath caught in my throat, my heart slammed against my ribs, and I stared at him in disbelief. The younger daughter. Me. I blinked, unable to move, unable to speak. My sister's smile cracked. "What? Number that can't be right. Read it again." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "It's very clear. Your parents made this decision jointly and documented it thoroughly. The house, the land, and the majority of their savings go to your sister." He nodded toward me. I gasped, the sound escaping like a broken dam. A rush of emotions collided inside me. Relief, vindication, shock so profound it almost knocked me out of my chair. Meanwhile, my sister erupted. "This is a mistake!" she shouted, slamming her hand on the desk. They wouldn't do this to me. I was the one who was always there, the one who took care of them. The lawyer cut her off with a calm but firm tone. Your parents were aware of your behavior. They expressed concern that you acted out of self-interest. Their exact words were, he flipped a page, then read aloud, we leave the majority of our estate to our younger daughter, who has shown kindness, resilience, and the heart of this family. My throat tightened, tears spilling before I could stop them. For months, I had felt invisible, erased, unwanted, and now, through their final words, my parents saw me. They chose me. I looked at my sister. Her face was pale, twisted in disbelief, her lips trembling. This isn't fair, she hissed. You don't deserve it. You never deserved it. The rage that once lived in me rose again, but this time it didn't burn me, it fueled me. I leaned forward, voice steady, eyes locked on hers. No, I said. I do deserve it, and deep down, you know it. Her eyes widened, but she had no words. For the first time, she looked small. The lawyer continued with formalities, but I barely heard him. All I could hear was the pounding of my heartbeat, the sound of chains breaking. When it ended, I stood, clutching the folder that now bore my future. My sister remained frozen in her chair, muttering under her breath, denial dripping from every syllable. I walked toward the door, pausing only once. I turned back, my voice calm but sharp as glass. You laughed when you thought you had taken everything from me. But you forgot one thing. Justice doesn't always show up on your timeline. Sometimes, it waits until you're arrogant enough to think you've won, and then it strikes. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I left the office, the winter air hitting my face like baptism, washing away months of despair. The city street bustled with strangers, cars honked, life moved on, but for me, time had shifted. For the first time since the funeral, I felt alive. Because in that room, in that single moment, I had been given back more than a house, more than money. I had been given back my worth. The law office emptied slowly, footsteps fading down the hallway. But my sister remained in her chair, frozen like a statue cracked in half. Her manicured hands trembled on the armrests, her eyes darting wildly as if searching for an exit from a nightmare that refused to end. I stood by the door, folder clutched to my chest, and for a moment I simply watched. The woman who had strutted through life, who had stolen my air with every smirk and every cruel word, now looked stripped bare. Then it happened. The dam broke. She slammed her fist on the desk, rattling the lawyer's pens. No! This isn't real. They loved me more. They always loved me more. Her voice cracked, jagged with hysteria. Tears streaked down her flawless makeup, black rivulets staining her cheeks. She ripped off her necklace and hurled it across the room, the chain snapping against the wall. Her breaths came ragged, animal-like, each one heavier than the last. You can't have it, she shrieked, pointing at me with a shaking finger. You don't deserve it. You don't deserve anything. You were always weak, always pathetic. Her words dissolved into a sob so violent it doubled her over. I froze. For months I had dreamed of this moment, her downfall, her collapse. I had pictured myself smiling, savoring every second. And yet, standing there, watching her unravel, the satisfaction was tangled with something unexpected. Pity. Not enough to forgive, not enough to forget, but enough to sting. Because no matter what she had done, she was still my sister. She sank to the floor, knees hitting the carpet with a dull thud. Her sobs echoed against the wood-paneled walls, filling the room with a raw, desperate sound that made the receptionist peek nervously through the glass door before retreating. This isn't fair, she whimpered, clutching at her hair. I gave them everything. I was there. I earned it. Why would they do this to me? I stepped closer, not out of comfort, but out of clarity. My voice came low, steady, almost unrecognizable even to myself. They saw you. For the first time, they really saw you, and they didn't like what they saw. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing with a mix of fury and despair. Shut up, she screamed. Shut up! You think you're better than me? You think this changes anything? She lunged toward me, grabbing my arm with a grip so tight it left marks. But I didn't flinch. I met her gaze head on, my voice sharp as glass. I don't think I'm better than you, I just know I'm not the monster you've become. Her grip loosened. Slowly, she collapsed backward onto the floor, curling into herself like a child lost in the dark. Her sobs turned into whispers, broken fragments of denial. It was supposed to be mine. It was always supposed to be mine. The lawyer returned briefly, papers in hand, but paused when he saw her crumpled form. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, then gave a small nod as if acknowledging that justice had already played its part, and left without a word. I stood over her, the air thick with the weight of years of rivalry, jealousy, and betrayal. My chest heaved, but my hands were steady. For the first time, I wasn't the one trembling. I bent down just enough for her to hear me. You laughed at my pain. You erased me from this family, but look at you now. You erased yourself. Her eyes widened, filling with fresh tears, and she let out a wail so sharp it felt like the room itself split in half. I turned, walked to the door, and didn't look back. The hallway outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing with a finality I couldn't ignore. I had won not just the house, not just the inheritance, but something far greater. I had won myself back. And behind me, in that office heavy with leather and shadows, my sister remained shattered, choking on the weight of her own downfall. The first night back in the house, I walked through every room with shaking hands. The air felt different, lighter, freer. For months, these walls had been a prison, echoing only grief and betrayal. But now, as I traced my fingers across the banister my father had built, across the photographs my mother had hung, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Belonging. I stood in the living room, the one where my sister once mocked me, and opened the curtains wide. Moonlight spilled across the floor, washing the shadows away. I breathed deep, filling my lungs with the scent of old wood and memories. And for the first time in a long time, the breath didn't hurt. The following week, I began to rebuild. I sorted through the boxes my sister had tried to steal. My father's medals gleamed under the light, each one a reminder of resilience. My mother's letters, yellowed with age, whispered of love and lessons long buried. I cried, yes, but they were not the same tears of despair. These were cleansing. Like rain washing dirt from the streets, neighbors came by, one by one. Mrs. Henderson from across the road brought apple pie. We were worried about you, she admitted softly. We saw how your sister treated you, but we didn't know how to help. Her words stung, but they also soothed, because sometimes silence isn't cruelty, it's fear. I spent afternoons painting the kitchen walls, evenings planting roses in the garden my mother once adored. My hands blistered, my back ached, but with every stroke, every seed, I felt my strength returning. This house was no longer a battlefield, it was a sanctuary. Yet the wound of my sister's betrayal lingered. At night, when the house grew quiet, I would hear echoes of her screams in the law office, the raw desperation in her voice. Part of me wanted to hate her forever, to seal the door on our bloodline and never look back. But another part, a smaller, fragile part, wondered if hate was just another chain keeping me bound. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the mailbox clanged. Another letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't from the lawyer, it was from her. The handwriting was messy, the ink smudged. The words were few, but heavy. I don't know how to live without the life I thought I deserved. I don't know who I am now. But I do know this. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want to lose you completely. I read it 3 times. My heart pulled in 2 directions. One side screamed, "Don't believe her. She's a snake. She'll hurt you again." The other whispered, "She's still your sister. Maybe this is her breaking point too." I set the letter down, staring into the night sky, stars scattered like wounds healing in the dark. Forgiveness, revenge. Both words tasted sharp on my tongue. Which one would I choose? Days passed, and the letter remained unanswered. I poured my energy into life itself. I hosted a small dinner for the first time since the funeral. Just neighbors, no family, but the laughter that filled the house that night stitched something inside me. I went back to school, enrolled in night classes. Something I had always wanted but never dared to try. I was building not just a house, but a future. And yet, the letter remained. Some nights, I'd unfold it, trace the words, hear her voice breaking through the ink. The part of me that still ached for family wondered if maybe, just maybe, we weren't finished. But I didn't decide that night, or the night after. Because sometimes strength isn't in the final act of forgiveness, nor in the final act of vengeance. Sometimes strength is in holding the choice, knowing you are free to make it when you are ready. As spring came, the roses bloomed. Their petals soft against the morning Sunday, I stood in the garden, hands covered in dirt, and realized something profound. I had survived. I had rebuilt. I had risen. Whether I let my sister back into my life or not, one truth was already mine. I was no longer the broken woman crying on the kitchen floor, begging for scraps of love. I was the owner of my story, the guardian of my future. And as the wind carried the scent of roses through the air, I whispered to myself, steady and sure, this is my new beginning, and no one can take it from me. I know this story may sound like something torn straight from a movie, but it's not. It's real, raw, and mine. I went through the funeral, the betrayal, the silence, the endless nights of loneliness. I stood in that lawyer's office, trembling, waiting to hear if I mattered at all. And when the truth finally came out, it shook my world in ways I'm still trying to understand. But here's what keeps me awake at night. That letter from my sister. Those words, her apology, her desperation, they haunt me. Because even after everything she's done, she's still my blood. Still the girl I shared a bedroom with when we were little. Still the one who knew all my secrets. So I stand at a crossroads. On one side is forgiveness, fragile and uncertain. On the other is distance, safer but lonelier, and I don't know which road to take. That's where I need you. If you had been through everything I endured, the lies, the humiliation, the betrayal, the breakdown, what would you do? Would you give her another chance, believing that even the cruelest hearts can change? Or would you close the door forever, protect yourself, and finally be free? Tell me in the comments, because maybe your perspective will help me make peace with my own. In every family, there are stories that never make it into the photo albums. Behind the smiling holiday cards, behind the Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings, there are secrets, wounds, and betrayals that cut deeper than any stranger ever could. That is why this story matters. It is not only about a woman losing her husband and fighting for her inheritance. It is about what happens when love, loyalty, and greed collide inside the very place we expect safety. The family. Grief has a way of exposing people. When someone dies, emotions are raw, and masks slip. For the woman at the center of this story, burying her husband was already unbearable. But the moment her sister turned her pain into an opportunity to seize power, the grief doubled. Pain rarely comes alone. It drags betrayal with it. Anyone who has lost someone knows that feeling. You are at your weakest, and suddenly you discover that the people you thought would hold you are the same ones pushing you down. It is a brutal truth, but one worth remembering. How people treat you when you are most vulnerable shows who they really are. Inheritance battles are not just drama for television. They happen every day in courtrooms across America. Brothers and sisters who once shared bedrooms as children now face each other across long wooden tables, fighting over houses, bank accounts, and family heirlooms. Money doesn't change people, it reveals them. Greed unmasks the selfish heart, and tragedy gives it permission to act. The sister in this story believed that possessions defined worth, but her parents, through their will, revealed a deeper truth: character defines worth. And in the end, it was kindness, resilience, and loyalty that carried the greater inheritance. Silence is another lesson here. For months, the protagonist endured humiliation, loneliness, and rejection. She stayed quiet, and her sister mistook that silence for weakness. But silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is where strength gathers, where fire is born. In life, People may laugh at you, dismiss you, or believe they've broken you. But silence is often the pause before the roar. And when the right moment comes, the truth speaks so loudly that no one can ignore it. The reading of the will was that moment. Justice did not arrive on her timeline. It did not come when she cried on the kitchen floor, begging the universe for relief. It came later, when arrogance had blinded her sister, when the room was filled with confidence and greed. And that is how justice often works. It waits. It arrives in its own time, sometimes when you least expect it. For anyone watching, the message is clear. Just because it hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean it won't. Truth has a way of surfacing. Justice may delay, but it rarely disappears forever. Still, the hardest lesson of all comes at the end. Revenge feels satisfying. Watching someone who hurt you finally break. Watching their pride crumble, that feels like victory. And yes, there is power in that. But what happens after the breakdown? In this story, the sister wrote a letter. It was messy, desperate, filled with regret. And that letter forces a new question. What do we do when those who betrayed us suddenly ask for forgiveness? Do we close the door forever, guarding our hearts from any more pain? Or do we risk reopening it, knowing that forgiveness is not weakness, but a different kind of strength? There is no simple answer. Some wounds are too deep to heal. Some betrayals cut so hard they leave permanent scars. And yet, holding on to hate can become its own prison. Forgiveness does not erase the past, it frees the future. Choosing whether to forgive or to walk away is not about them, it is about you. About the life you want to live. About the peace you deserve. What this story leaves us with is not just drama but reflection. Families can hurt us, sometimes more than anyone else. But we are not defined by the cruelty we endure. We are defined by the way we rise from it. The protagonist of this story did not just win a house or money, she won herself back. She reclaimed her dignity, her voice, her future, and that is something every viewer can take into their own lives. So ask yourself, when betrayal comes knocking, when family wounds you in ways strangers never could, how will you respond? Will you let bitterness chain you forever? Will you fight for justice until truth has its say? Will you forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace? Life will always bring grief. It will always bring betrayal in some form. But it also offers something else, the chance to rise, to rebuild, to choose a new beginning. And when that moment comes, you will discover what this story has already proven, that even in the darkest chapters, strength can be born, justice can prevail, and healing can begin.